Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're tackling something that's honestly incredibly personal and, yeah, a bit challenging. Have you ever just stopped and felt like maybe your thoughts aren't completely your own? Like you're walking through a world that's literally just designed to spoon-feed you prepackaged truths? Well, the source text we're unpacking today maps out exactly this. It calls it the architecture of delusion. And by breaking it down together, we might just figure out how to reclaim our intellectual autonomy. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. The source hits us with a total gut punch right out of the gate. It says, it is better to not have answers to critical questions rather than not being able to critically question the answers you already have. I mean, wow, that perfectly sets the tone for everything we're going to unpack today. Look, we live in a society that absolutely demands immediate answers, right? We hate not knowing things. We're so deeply uncomfortable with it. But the source material makes a really powerful argument here. It says blind acceptance is actually way more dangerous than ignorance. The true superpower of an independent mind is the act of questioning itself, not just hoarding a static list of unquestionable facts.
So this brings us to Section 1, the trap of certainty, and how prepackaged answers confine us.
To really see how this certainty trap works, we can look at some systems of suppression outlined in the text. We're talking about things like cults, religious dogmatism, tribalism, groupism, and casteism. We really have to grasp how society sets these traps for us through forced certainty. And the crazy thing is, it's not always this obvious cartoon villain type of control. Often it's dressed up as comfort or tradition or simply belonging. These prepackaged answers are handed to us specifically to confine our thinking, because let's face it, a confined mind is a predictable mind. Now, on the surface, these might look like completely different social structures, but the text reveals they actually share the exact same underlying mechanism. They all know exactly how to stop you from questioning the status quo. They survive entirely on the premise that you literally cannot question what has already been answered, and you absolutely cannot challenge what is already written and treated as gospel. Their whole existence depends on silencing your inner skeptic.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict. There is a massive, massive difference between learning how to think and being told what to think. Being told what to think demands submission. If an institution or a group is telling you what to think, they're just handing you a script and demanding compliance to their pre-existing answers. But if you learn how to think, that's how you build true independence. Sovereignty and critical questioning give you a solid framework to evaluate any piece of information that comes your way, no matter who is trying to sell it to you. All right, moving on to Section 2, how we distort reality and the architecture of delusion. Now, it would be super easy to just point fingers at external groups and institutions, but we also have to look in the mirror at our own internal battles with the truth. We aren't just helpless victims of external control. A lot of the time, we are the architects of our own mental prisons. The text makes this incredibly striking point. We manifest and create realities to fit our damaged personal truths. So I want to pause and ask you a direct question. Do you actively bend the world around you to match your own internal damage? I mean, on a small scale, it's kind of like convincing yourself that skipping the gym was actually essential self-care. We've all been there. But on a larger scale, when we hold on to a damaged perspective, maybe something born from trauma or bias or fear, we don't just passively view the world through that lens. We actively construct our reality to validate that exact damage. We seek out the information that confirms our fears, and we straight up ignore the evidence that challenges our carefully constructed delusions.
This leads perfectly into how we actually perform under pressure. The source states, situations would not create heroes or villains, but situations will reveal the people they already are. Just let that sink in for a second. We love to think that a crisis completely changes us, right? That a sudden, dramatic event molds a person into a hero or a villain. But the text argues that external events don't create our character at all. They only expose our true nature. When the architecture of delusion gets shaken up by a real-world situation, the mask drops, and the absolute core of who we are is simply revealed to everyone.
Part of stripping away that delusion involves seriously right-sizing our ego when it comes to what we think we understand. The text breaks down our relationship with certainty into 3 neat categories: things we know, things we don't know, and critically, things we cannot know forever. Accepting this third category, the permanently unknown, is an absolutely crucial part of having an autonomous mind. When you finally accept that some things are simply unknowable, it's like a superpower. You become immune to the gurus, the cult leaders, and the dogmatists who falsely claim to have all the answers neatly wrapped up. Which brings us to Section 3, the danger of the crowd and the battle between belief and truth. Once we get a handle on our own internal delusions, we have to look at what happens when those delusions group together. And the terrifying power of groupthink is that a crowd fiercely and sometimes violently protects its shared illusions. The text puts it bluntly, it's incredibly difficult to breach a well-structured delusion. You literally cannot just walk up to a group of people who share a deep-seated belief and change their minds with pure logic. When a delusion is well-structured, when it has its own rules, its own community, and its own twisted internal logic, it acts as an impenetrable fortress against facts.
Notice the chilling distinction the author makes here regarding consequences. People die fighting for what they believe versus people get killed fighting for truth. That first part implies agency, right? They willingly march into battle for a shared narrative. But getting killed fighting for truth shows the severe and sometimes fatal consequences of challenging the group's narrative. When you bring the actual truth to a group that's drunk on belief, you aren't just engaging in a polite debate. You literally become a target.
And this results in a very pessimistic but highly critical reality that we really must face. According to the text, a foolish and irrational group always wins over a person, no matter how intelligent and factual that individual happens to be. It's a sobering equation of social dynamics. Sheer numbers and loud, aggressive irrationality will almost always drown out a solitary voice of reason. You simply cannot out-logic a mob.
So what do we do? That brings us to Section 4. Choosing autonomy over security and refusing to be silent.
If the crowd is really that dangerous and that fiercely resistant to facts, how do we fight back against that overwhelming gravitational pull? Well, we have to consciously choose autonomy over security, and we have to absolutely refuse to be silent. The source demands 3 explicit actions from us to maintain our sovereignty. Number 1, don't be silent just to make others feel better. I mean, how often do we bite our tongues just to keep the peace, inadvertently validating someone else's delusion? Number 2, resist and stop bad behavior and attitude, even though they cause temporary distress. Notice the word temporary there. Standing up for reality is uncomfortable for sure, but that distress is a necessary price to pay. And number 3, keep your freedom. Guard it fiercely against the constantly encroaching demands of the group. So, the crucial point is summarized perfectly in this quote. Don't give up your autonomy and freedom for a temporary sense of security. No one can guarantee anything for you. The security offered by the group, whether it's the comfort of the cult, the tribe, or the dogma, is entirely an illusion. It's fake. They offer you a cozy safety blanket in exchange for your sovereign mind. But when real situations arise that reveal who people truly are, that guaranteed security will vanish in a heartbeat. At the end of the day, you are your only true guarantor. And finally, we hit Section 5, the sovereign mind, and becoming the outside-the-box thinker. This brings us to the ultimate cost and the ultimate reward of reclaiming your mind. We have to frame your final internal battle against the default state of society itself. As described in the text, the world actually wants to stay delusional, controlled, and dependent. It is so much easier to be handed a script of what to think than it is to bear the heavy, exhausting responsibility of knowing how to think. Waking up is hard work. Staying asleep in a shared, cozy delusion is incredibly comfortable. And because of that dynamic, we arrive at this extremely powerful conclusion from the source text. In a world that desperately wants to be controlled and dependent, a person who thinks outside the box becomes mad and crazy man. Think about that. If the baseline of reality is just a well-structured, agreed-upon delusion, then true sanity, factual intelligence, and individual sovereignty will always look like absolute madness to the crowd. You aren't going to be celebrated by the tribe for pointing out their illusions. You're going to be exiled as a lunatic. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to linger on. We've seen exactly how the architecture of delusion is built. We've seen the trap of forced certainty, the absolute danger of the irrational crowd, and the illusion of group security. The path to a sovereign mind is clearly laid out for us, but the cost is standing entirely apart from the crowd. So, you have to answer this for yourself. Are you willing to be called crazy to keep your mind free? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning.